Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, back with another gear review, and this time it's thanks to the guys at ADG, thank you Bruce, for the care package that arrived in the form of these 3 units here. These are all by Two Notes Audio Engineering, and this is one for the guitarists really, the guitarists and those who like recording electric guitar. Two Notes Audio have done a great job of managing our expectations when it comes to high power amplifiers. Now, there is nothing quite like a Marshall stack or a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier at full tilt. There is also nothing like one of those amps at full tilt to annoy your neighbors. And I'm not even talking about if you're in an apartment or in a semi-detached house. I'm talking about people 3 miles away. There is nothing quite like the volume of a 4x12 cabinet, giving it large in your studio. Quite frankly, it hurts. Now, what these units do, amongst other things, is basically that they're kind of load splitters or load dividers or load units. So allowing us to have all the tone and the beauty and the raw power of that 100 watt or 150 watt, in fact, up to 150 watts in the Torpedo Reload, taking it down, taking the volume down, but not taking the tone away, I think is probably a good way of describing it. Now, the Torpedo Reload is exactly that. It's the most simple of all the units we've got here. It's basically that. It's a load box. It's a way of reducing your on-stage volume, but still keeping your on-stage tone. There are options for reamping and things like that within here, but we're not really going to concentrate on this one today. The Torpedo Live is exactly what it says on the tin. It's designed for the live market. Now, that's not to say it wouldn't be just as at home in the studio, but it is, again, it's designed to be a load box, a load divider to take the absolute raw volume out of your guitar cabinet and bring it down to something sensible on stage. Trust me, I work with plenty of loud guitarists, and the loudest thing on stage is always the guitarist's amplifier. Now, the thing we're going to look at today is the Torpedo Studio. Why? Because I think mainly this is the one, as audio engineers, we're going to be most interested in. Yes, it does all the load dividing and the load box stuff and reamping and all those sort of things as well. But in software, and a software that I can show you on the screen really easily, this thing gives us, quite frankly, more options than you could ever have in real life. More cabinets, more microphones, more positions, more rooms, all that sort of stuff. So what this allows us to do is take our real guitar, our pedals perhaps, and our real guitar amp head, as it's referred to, run it through here without a speaker, and the speaker load and the speaker emulation is being done by this box in software in real time. And quite frankly, it does an amazing job of it. The cabinet emulations, the mic emulations, and actually, if you want it, the power amp emulations that can come out of this box sound quite awesome. So enough from me, let's dive over into Pro Tools so you can see and hear exactly what's going on with the Two Notes Torpedo Studio. So I thought it only fair, before we dive into the Torpedo Studio, for you to actually hear how my guitar recording rig sounds without the Torpedo, of course. So I've got my Les Paul running into a TC Spark boost pedal, and that's running into my Chandler GAV19T, which is running into a 2x12 Marshall cabinet with GT75s, not particularly good speakers, I have to admit, and that's being mic'd up by a Shure SM57, why not, and a Sontronics Delta ribbon mic. So I've got a dynamic and a ribbon on the cabinet. They are as in phase as I can make it with my amazing Dynamount system, and it sounds pretty damn good. I think you'll agree, and this is it. So I've repatched a little bit to enable me to use the Torpedo Studio. All I've done is instead of now the output of the Chandler amp going into the speaker, it now comes out of the Chandler and runs straight into the speaker input. Yes, speaker input, not output, of the Torpedo Studio. Thus, I get all the loveliness of my amp sound, and then I can pretty much mess with what would be the loud bit, the speaker, microphone, and positioning in the 2 Notes Torpedo Studio. And more importantly, I can do that running the Torpedo remote control app on my Mac or PC, and I'll show you that now. Here we are in the 2 Notes Torpedo remote application. Now, it's a very, very simple thing, really. We have our preset selection and saving over here, and you can see I can load either from the Torpedo itself or from my computer if I had any installed. And there are plenty to be going on with. My input selection. Now, obviously, the louder you have the guitar amp itself, the lower you want the input. Power amp section. If I was using a Guitar Effects preamp that did not have a power amp section in it, I can turn this on and simulate a power amp being used. Now, the GAV does have a power amp in it, and I'm using some of the power soak features in the Torpedo Studio, so I don't want to turn this on. Cabinet selection, and there are plenty. Microphone selection, and there are a handful. We then have our microphone setup options: distance, on, center, or off, front and back of the cabinet, Veriphonics, overload, and our wet dry mix. We then have a low cut, which is basically a high pass filter. Our EQ, we can choose to put an EQ in or out of the mix. An exciter, compressor. I can go into the store to buy more goodies. Quick preview allows me to go between my previous setup and what I'm currently editing. My output is obviously my output into Pro Tools. And from the back of the Torpedo Studio, I'm running 2 XLRs, so I've got a stereo mix right back into Pro Tools. Now, the cool thing is I've got cabinets A and B, meaning I can have a hard left and right stereo split of 2 cabinets. Very, very cool. Or, of course, I have a pan control and I can bring them straight up the middle if it was a solo. But for rhythm parts, it's really cool to have 2 different cabinets running hard left and right. So let's just run through some of these presets and you can see what's going on. I'll play roughly the same sort of thing with roughly the same sort of sound from the amp. So let's start with lead 1. Now, it's quite different to the sound I had out of my amp, but mine's only a Super 12. So let's see if we can manually recreate something a little bit closer to what I had before. So I know full well I've got a dynamic and a ribbon. So I'm going to change my cabinet to something that I recognize. That's a 2 Notes. So I'm going to have a ribbon. And then on the other side, I'm going to have the same 2 Notes. And I'll have, that's condenser, 57. So see how we get on with this one. Really, really cool. I like that. Now, of course, the chances of getting it exactly the same as my setup are incredibly remote. We'd have to match mic position, we'd have to match the exact speaker types, and quite frankly, the GT75s aren't my favorite, so I wouldn't have necessarily gone for those in a simulated cabinet anyway. But let's just try and get some really cool sounds. Let's go run through some of these presets. Now, one of the cool things is we can also reverse the cabinet front or back. So it makes a massive difference. This thing is so versatile. It feels like I'm playing through a really big, powerful amp, which is, quite frankly, what I am doing. It just so happens it's in there. Now, the GAV-19T, my Chandler, is only 19 watts, but trust me, it's the loudest 19 watts you've ever heard. It is unbearable when it's on full tilt. Let's try some more. Vintage 5. Now, of course, if I want to, I can bypass things like the miking and the speaker cabinet emulation, all that sort of stuff. But don't do it. See? Don't do it. That's how guitar amps sound, straight in with no cabinet and no mic emulation. Not pleasant. Let's try some more of these presets. Let's go a bit further up the... This thing is very, very cool and really easy to use. California Metal. And if I want to change the cabinet, fantastic, and it's really quick. Now, if I turn on the low cut feature, and this is separate for each amp, of course, or each side of the unit, A and B, my two different speakers. It's actually a really, really smooth high-pass filter. Now, it has to be said that I think most of the time you notice things like microphone shift and cabinet emulation on high gain sounds, and most of the demos that Two Notes have got online do use higher gain, more metally, more sort of thrashy kind of sounds. But of course, there are things like the Tuba 12 JC120 cabinet. And if I just take the Spark Boost out of the loop a moment. Anyone who says, oh, the cabinet and the microphone don't make a difference, I think we're proving them wrong at this point. So I think this thing's very, very cool. Now, it has to be said it's not cheap, but it's also not cheap to go out and buy that many guitar cabinets and to have them all in a space the size of a single guitar head. Let's kick that overdrive back in. Absolutely fantastic, and I'm really only scratching the surface of what this thing can do. So there you go, that's the Torpedo Studio from Two Notes Audio Engineering. French company, and this thing, quite frankly, is awesome. I'm loving it. It's one of those things that I'm really not going to want to give back. Quite frankly, this thing takes an awful lot of the pain points out of recording electric guitar. 2 microphones, 2 cabinets, a practically infinite number of different cabinets. I have 1. Sometimes that combination of that cabinet and any guitar head just isn't going to work. And there's an absolute ton of them in here, and if you run out, there's plenty of stuff online. It's a convolution creation engine, so you can create your own cabinets, you can map your own cabinets, if you will. It's very, very simple to use. All the features of the remote control app are available via the wheel and functionality of the front panel. It takes a little while to get your head around the navigation of it, but quite frankly, that's the same as anything. It's not something you're just going to dive straight into, whereas the app makes editing the presets and editing some of the stuff on the front panel much, much easier. This is one of those things that you won't get bored of playing with, because you'll stumble on some fantastic sounds. You'll get a sound that's nearly working for a track, and you'll be diving in, tweaking stuff, just going that extra little bit nerdy. If you don't have guitar heads, a whole collection of heads, but you've got a few pedals, fine, go with that. Get yourself a half decent EQ, turn on the power amp section, and away you go. You're making your own guitar amplifiers, if you like, as you go along. Completely custom made stuff that's pedals and the simulation, and it's very, very cool. No track this time. Quite frankly, you've had quite enough of me noodling my way through this. So hope you enjoyed that. I've been James from Pro Tools Expert, and I'll see you again soon for some more gear talk.